do you have to tell the patient, are you vegetarian or a non-vegetarian? Is it important? Where are they derived from, these tablets?
From porcine.
Oh, very important, no? Tomorrow,
yes.
Yeah, the patient should not say, you never told me about this.
What are the complications of pancreatic enzyme replacement therapy?
So there have been reported cases of stricture formation in fibrotic strictures in intestine, and
that's with very high doses.
yes.
Okay, Varghese, we'll go on to the second.
Yes, hyperuricemia is another complication because that is also one of the complications of enzyme replacement therapy. Okay, please go ahead with the second case. Ravi Kiran is supposed to discuss now.
Ravi Kiran is here. Samir,
Okay,
you can.
Samir, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Ravi?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, so this is your case, right?
Yes,
okay.
sir.
Tell.
Good evening, sir. Good evening, ma'am. 54-year-old man presented with a 6-month history of low-grade fever, night sweats, fecal urgency, and low back pain. 1 year ago, he had total proctocolectomy, ileal pouch anal anastomosis, and a loop ileostomy. The surgery took 9 hours as he had fulminant ulcerative colitis, severe anemia, and hypoalbuminemia. His post-operative course was complicated by the development of pelvic abscess, which was drained radiographically. 6 months later, the colorectal surgeon performed loop ileostomy closure.
Now, I want you to answer these questions.
Yes.
What are the indications for surgery in ulcerative colitis?
In cases of acute severe ulcerative colitis not responding to steroids as per Oxford criteria, sir, and persistent symptoms in spite of completing all the step-up therapy until biologicals also, then again indication for surgery. And,
like Madam Jayanti said,
or malignancy.
Can you be more systematic? Can you classify them into bundles and say that this is one bundle, this is one bundle, and next is one bundle?
Complicated and uncomplicated.
Complicated by malignancy. Complicated and malignancy in ulcerative colitis also indication for surgery. In acute settings, in chronic settings, in acute settings as acute severe ulcerative colitis, in chronic refractory to therapy, or for complications of ulcerative colitis like a malignancy.
In acute settings or an emergency surgery, you will have only acute severe ulcerative colitis in that bundle, or you have something else also, some other conditions, which could be an emergency.
In toxic megacolon, sir.
Yes, then what else? I want you to just concentrate on emergency, acute complications. Think, I'm sure you'll be able to. No idea? You have suspected a perforation?
Yes, sir.
Bleeding?
Yes, sir.
Patients presenting with these can cause, and some patients, there are some patients who can have severe pain. Of course, they could have microperforation, but these are all indications for an emergency surgery, which you cannot do with. And then you have the next bundle where you have patients who are having a chronic problem, but still end up having surgery. One of them you said is malignancy or a high-grade dysplasia.
Yes, sir. Yes.
Severe or ulcerative colitis not responding to medical therapy.
Yes, sir.
No? So
yes,
you should learn how to classify it. Whenever you're asked a question, you must first of all try to classify it into groups. Then only it becomes very evident to the examiner that you know the subject. But if you go random here and there without touching anything, then the examiner quickly knows that you're just beating around the bush and you don't have a sound knowledge of the subject. So that is you must
Yes.
make it a habit.
Yes.
Professor Rajesh, any comments from your side?
Yeah, I think it's okay.
So, Ravi, tell me,
Yes.
okay, what are the surgical procedures that are done in ulcerative colitis?
So again, it can be classified as whether the disease is limited, limited disease or extensive disease, or for complications. If it is for limited disease, you can go for a limited resection like left hemic.
Or as an emergency, or as an emergency.
Or as an emergency.
Or not.
Yes.
Elective or elective.
Elective or emergency. Yes.
Ravi, I have an objection to your one comment that you made, that it depends on the extent of the disease. How does the extent of the disease affect the type of surgery?
If it is only limited to a left-sided colon, then left hemicolectomy also.
So if it is just a proctitis, you will just look at a surgery that will remove the rectum, retain the rest of the colon.
Is that the treatment for ulcerative colitis?
No, sir. No. No, sir. It will be a total proctocolectomy with ileal pouch anal anastomosis.
So one point that all of you must be very clear about is, unlike Crohn's, surgery for ulcerative colitis almost always involves the removal of the entire
colon.
It's a proctocolectomy. There's nothing, yes. Even if it is left-sided or a limited disease, you will still go in for a proctocolectomy. Why is it?
Because still the risk of malignancy or recurrent disease can be there in the rest of the colon.
You're right. So you should not say about the extent of the disease.
Yes,
with reference to surgery. Okay. Now, yes, you said proctocolectomy with ileoanal pouch anastomosis. Is there any other surgery?
Patient comes with severe bleeding 20-30 times per day for
yes,
last
sir.
1 month. So what will be your treatment option?
With for a diversion ileostomy.
Keep answering. One is diversion ileostomy, number 1. Number 2, you can also do a subtotal colectomy. Subtotal colectomy and just have the rectal pouch, especially if the person is of the younger age and has not gone through the family. So those are the patients where we retain, don't meddle much with the pelvis. So we just do a diversion ileostomy, leave the patient alone, and then go in for the second surgery later when everything settles down. And it's easier to manage just the rectal pouch that's there with local treatment. So you have to again classify. That's why I said emergency versus patients with elective surgery.
You see, elective.
So
you're not answering. Answer now.
Yeah, answer.
Yes. Yes. Is it an acute setting or an emergency or an elective setting? In cases of emergency, you can go for ileostomy, diversion ileostomy, and subtotal colectomy. Hello.
Yes. Carry on.
Yes.
If it is elective.
In elective, then we can go for a total proctocolectomy with ileal pouch anastomosis.
So we won't go into the details about pouch, types of pouch. That is a surgical topic. But can you define for us steroid refractory disease and steroid dependent disease?
Yes. Steroid refractory disease is, in spite of adequate dose of steroids, not able to maintain induced remission within 4 weeks is called a steroid refractory.
What do you mean by adequate dose of steroids?
And steroid.
Your network is bandwidth is
1 milligram per kg to max of penicillin is. Sir, am I audible, sir?
your voice is breaking. What is steroid refractory and what is steroid dependent?
Hello.
Samir, you take over.
Samir,
Yes, ma'am.
Steroid means unable to. Hello.
yeah,
Yes, sir. Steroid dependent disease would be unable to wean off the steroids within 4 weeks of stopping, sir.
Mhm.
Again, the disease remission goes into relapse.
Okay. And refractory?
And steroid refractory is in steroids, patient is not able to achieve remission, sir.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
Yes.
Now, this is what I want you to say. Steroid responsive, steroid dependent, and steroid refractory. Steroid dependent is ulcerative colitis, defined as steroid dependent if glucocorticoids cannot be tapered to less than 10 milligrams per day within 3 months of starting steroids without recurrent disease, or if relapse occurs within 3 months of stopping glucocorticoids. That is steroid dependent disease.
Yes.
And steroid refractory diseases, lack of a meaningful clinical response to glucocorticoids up to doses of prednisone 40 to 60 milligrams within 30 days of oral therapy, or 7 to 10 days of intravenous. So these are all very, very specific. So you should not be using terminologies like adequate dose or appropriate or time period and all those things. You must be very, very specific about the time period as well as the dose. Okay. Anything from your side, Professor Rajesh?
Yeah, I think that's fine. Yeah. We can, are we discussing the case? I mean, I think there were some symptoms in the case, no? So,
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Yes.
No, I went straight to the some of these questions. Okay.
Yeah.
You want to ask something else? Yeah.
I think one more question was that the complication.
Yeah. So, Samir, what are the short-term complications and long-term complications of
Samir or Ravi Kiran?
Ravi Kiran? Ravi is back?
Ravi's back? No.
No.
Oh, then Samir.
Samir?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. What will you explain to the patient? Patient being prepared for surgery. What are the complications that are likely to happen?
Sir, first patient will have a long-term stoma. If you're not planning an ileal, we are planning a colostomy with total proctectomy. Or if you're an ileal pouch anal anastomosis, there patient may have a risk of pouchitis in the future. And also, we should prepare the patient for perioperative complications like sepsis. If patient has had a perforation, deep vein thrombosis, and
so complications that can happen in the perioperative period, the post-operative period, and long-term complications. So what are the complications that can happen in the perioperative and post-operative, immediate post-operative?
Sir, perioperatively patient can have a leak, fistula formation unlikely, and formation of an due to leak collection and infection of the collection, and indrop, because these patients are risk of having a DVT, that is another complication. And in immediate perioperative, patient can have anastomotic site leak, and
so sepsis, leak, sometimes bleeding can happen.
Bleeding, yes, sir.
Okay.
Bleeding.
And when these patients are bedridden for some time, you can have thrombosis, deep vein thrombosis. Then long-term complications?
Sir, long-term complications, if patient has had colostomy and if we had underlying PSC, these patients tend to have peristomal varices in about 30 to 40% of cases, and then peristomal hernia, parastomal hernias, and if patient has ileal pouch anastomosis, then disc of pouchitis is there, and if there is a rectal stump that is now being left with ileal pouch anastomosis, that can develop inflammation. And we also need to do surveillance for malignancy after 10 to 12 years for these patients only, but this chance is very less.
Any other complications that can happen in the long term?
Long term, if patient was only ulcerative colitis, some extraintestinal manifestation can present like PSC. Others like sacroiliitis and
I'm talking about local complications.
Local complications
related to the surgery.
Incisional hernia, parastomal hernias, and
okay. They can have long-term sexual dysfunction.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Especially if ileal pouch anastomosis is there for females. That is why they prefer to do a colostomy before, and then they will go ahead with after patient conceives and after deliveries, then they will do an anastomosis.
And they can have pelvic floor dysfunction as well, because sometimes the dissection and all involves a muscle.
Yes, sir. Adhesions and then intestinal obstruction.
Okay. So we continue with the case. Since the closure of the stoma, the patient reported that he has never felt well, poor appetite, pelvic discomfort, difficulty in sitting because of pain, not able to gain weight, physical examination, anemia with long surgical scars. There's tenderness at the low spine, particularly the tip of the coccyx, and he's got slightly high counts and he's anemic. What would you do next and why?
Gian, shall we take the next candidate then?
Yes.
Joe?
Yes, sir.
Okay, Joe.
Joe.
Yes, sir.
So you've been following this question. What
Can
would
you just show once more?
Sir, it's actually a patient who had undergone IPAA for ulcerative pulmonary ulcerative colitis. And he's been, you were talking about the complications and the definitions. Now, since the closure of the stoma, the patient reports that he is not felt well, and he has some poor appetite, has pelvic dysfunction, and he has pain, and he has physical exam showed signs of anemia. And
that's okay. You don't have to repeat everything, but what?
Actually, as per the labs, he has got an increased total count and low hemoglobin. So most probably he'll be having an inflammation of the post-surgery complication like pouchitis, and also since he has got a pouch, maybe a pouch failure that is causing malabsorption and leading to anemia.
Pouchitis, pouch failure causing malabsorption and anemia. How do you explain that?
Anyway, sir, his total count is elevated, so pouchitis is a possibility, sir. And maybe another reason, maybe he's having bleeding from the mucosa that is causing low hemoglobin. Inflammation of the pouch causing bleeding.
And that causes low hemoglobin. But what you mentioned, malabsorption. Did you mention malabsorption?
No, sir, sorry.
Should be very careful about the words.
No, sir, malabsorption.
Okay. So what would you do next and why? What investigations would you do to find out what this patient has?
So after these total count and hemoglobin, definitely a pouch scopy, sir.
Pouch scopy. Okay. What is it?
To assess
what is it that you're looking for?
Actually, to assess the mucosa of the pouch, whether we can find any inflammation of the mucosa, any signs of pouchitis, and to assess the pouch.
Okay, any other investigation that you would like to go in for because you want to know what exactly this patient has
Sir,
got pain
other
in the tip
other
of the
information,
coccyx and high counts.
and sir, definitely an imaging, CT or a MRI pelvis to see if there is any collection.
Between CT and MRI pelvis, what would be your choice? Why?
No, that's the way you answer. No, you cannot say I'll do CT or MRI pelvis. No, you have to. The patient is in front of you.
Okay, ma'am.
You cannot put the option open to the patient. No, answer very carefully. Otherwise, one more question is coming. No, why did you ask one for the other? What is your preferred investigation and why? That's what sir is asking.
An MRI pelvis, I would prefer an MRI pelvis.
Why?
Because post colectomy and when there's a pouch, and to assess the pelvic region to look for collection, and so MRI pelvis would be a better option.
The superiority of an MRI over a CT lies in actually delineation of collections around or even the sinuses and the fistula. That is why we usually go in for MR pelvis over the CT scan if you have to evaluate for a pelvic problem, a pelvic complication of IBD or a post-operative problem. So you should be very clear about the investigation that you want. Is there any other simple investigation that can be done? Have you heard of a investigation called pouchogram imaging?
So yes, sir, pouchogram to like a barium study, sir.
A contrast study.
A
Yes,
contrast.
contrast.
To, yes, sir.
Okay. So basically, this is what was done in this patient. Can you tell us what you see here? Can you read this this film for us?
Actually, in this contrast pouchogram,
Abhishek,
there
please
is a,
mute. Abhishek, mute.
we can see the pouches well filled with the contrast, but at the distalmost part of the pouch, there is a structuring.
There is?
It's structured, sir. There is narrowing of the lumen.
Where is the structure? Here? This is a structure that you're referring to?
So beyond that.
You think there's a web,
Yeah.
is it? You think there's a web there? There's no
Pardon?
structure. No, I'm asking him, you think there's a web there? Esophageal web like.
Yeah, I know.
That's
What
not,
do you see?
What are you saying? There's a normal one. It's going into the ileum, no?
This
You
is
can see the barium flowing into the ileum.
Okay, it's a catheter. I'm sorry.
this is a catheter. Okay.
Okay.
You thought this is a stricture. My God. Actually, you have put your foot into your mouth, actually. Huh?
But he did not say it's a fistula, no?
I know. What are you seeing? This is a
The walls are irregular, sir. And,
okay. Anything else that you see?
Ian, I think they've never seen one, so you can just explain.
Yeah. So basically, this is why the reason why I put this up is we have lost track of all these conventional studies. Basically, this is a tube pouchogram. Here you find a very adequately filled up pouch with the contrast going into the ileum, and there's absolutely no dilatation, no proximal dilatation. But what you see is extravasation here. Can you see this small thing, Joe?
Yes, yes, sir.
This one. So this is a small extravasation, and this is clearly an abnormal finding, and it should not be seen in patients who've got a normal pouch. And this indicates to you that at that time he had a post-operative complication, and that has left behind a residual problem like this. And that is what I'm going to come to. What is the next? The other thing which you must always comment is on these the walls. Are they shaggy? Are they clear, very regular without much of ulcerations? So here actually, if you look, it's quite okay. It's not all that bad. Sometimes you in extensively ulcerated pouches, you'll find a lot of there'll be a lot of shaggy margins. But here definitely the margins are a bit, irregular, and here probably there are some ulcers. So this is what is abnormal, and that is why we go on to the next question. Basically, based on the clinical presentation imaging study, what is your diagnosis? I think now it becomes very simple. What
Yes,
would be your
yes.
Diagnosis?
Presacral.
Presacral sinus. So that is what basically it's a common surgical complication, and it is an end result of a presacral leak, but patients can present with characteristic pain and tenderness in the coccyx, and it should not be confused with Crohn's disease of the pouch, and it can be treated with endoscopy or surgery. Who's going to take up the next one? Next question.
Snija.
We are 9 o'clock.
Snija,
Sir.
are you there?
Snija,
Yes, sir.
Okay.
so what is this, Snija?
A manometer.
What manometer is it? What is the type? What are the types of manometer?
High resolution manometer.
High resolution.
Manometer.
Further classified, it's an impedance manometer. Why do you say it is an impedance manometer?
There's a balloon at the end.
Where's the balloon? I can't see the balloon. This one? Is this the balloon that you're referring to? It's not the balloon. What do you mean by impedance manometry?
Small.
Yeah. What do you mean by what do you mean by impedance manometry?
We'll check the comments of the wall at the same time.
No, your voice is you're also
Okay.
suffering from poor
Audio is not
network.
clear. Yeah, audio is not clear.
Aniket?
Aniket,
Aniket.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Take over.
tell me what is meant by impedance or solid state manometer?
So in impedance catheter, there will be multiple points, and it will measure the resistance between two particular points. If it is the liquid medium, the resistance will be less, and if it is the air or gaseous, the resistance will be more. Then there will be a dip in the gaseous. If the gas will be there, then there will be the increase in the graph. Graph will pick up, and if it is the liquid thing, the graph will come down. It will dip in the graph.
So the impedance is low. These are the
Yes, sir.
the electrodes type of thing, and
Impedance
this
low.
looks at the impedance between the current passes from here to here through whatever is surrounding this. And if it is liquid, it is low impedance. If it is air, the impedance is high. That is why it is called impedance. Earlier manometers used to be the liquid ones, where you used to have water flowing at a regular rate. But this one is called an impedance. Okay, now you can read the story and then we'll go on to the case. Yeah.
A 24-year-old woman present to clinic for evaluation of refractory reflux symptoms. She notes a 3-year history of reflux and dysphagia, which is painless and non-progressive. She reports heartburn and regurgitation, particularly at night when lying flat. She is maintained on esomeprazole 40 mg 3 times daily with no significant improvement. She was told that she has a Scagzi ring and was previously dilated 3 times without effect. Her most recent outside endoscopy was reported to be normal.
Okay, so now what more information? Do you think that this history is enough, or would you like to have some more details from the history?
So she is telling she is having 3-year histodysphagia and reflux. I want to know that whether it is with the solid or liquid. It is started with what?
It's with liquids as and solids. It is non-progressive.
Yeah.
Anything else that you would like to? We know that it is painless. Anything else that you would like to know?
I want to ask that whether she is having a feeling of food stuck on the chest.
How will that help you?
That will. Is there any?
No, you said you would ask whether the food gets stuck periodically in the chest. Why? How does that help you? What information does that give you? If I say that it is getting stuck frequently, what does it tell you?
Is there any compression or obstruction, or is there any stricture is there or not?
So food getting stuck in the chest is indicative of a stricture.
Indicative of some obstructions are in the esophagus, thoracic esophagus.
Mm-hmm. Anything else that you will ask for as far as food getting stuck? Approach to dysphagia. Now, what I am trying to look at is how well you can analyze a history of dysphagia. So you said we have some information. I have withheld a little bit of information. I want you to find out more about this dysphagia.
Where the dysphagia is continuous or it is the intermittent?
Okay, so it is intermittent or continuous. An intermittent dysphagia is suggestive of?
In case of like eosinophilic esophagitis, the dysphagia will be intermittent. And in case of obstruction or in Scatzy ring also, the dysphagia will be continuous.
Okay, Scatzy ring, it will be continuous, and eosinophilic esophagitis, it will be intermittent. Any other common examples that you can give? Intermittent dysphagia versus continuous dysphagia. How many cases of eosinophilic esophagitis have you seen?
Very few cases, sir.
Then why do you want to pick up this as an example?
Just think of luminal, no? Luminal and non-luminal, no? So luminal will be continuous, but once it comes to the mucosa and the wall, it will become intermittent.
Yes, in case of motility,
if it's obstructive, it will become progressive occlusion. So just keep in mind, esophagus, when all in the lumen, can you get intermittent pain? When in the wall, you get intermittent pain. That is all mechanical, and then motility disorders. Broadly, these are only two classifications. So in that context, I was asking you, when all can you get intermittent, non-progressive dysphagia? That's the question.
Yes, sir. In case of a motility disorder, also the like esophageal spasm and all, and here the dysphagia will be intermittent, sir. And in achalasia also initially the dysphagia will be intermittent, but it is both with solid and liquid. And in case of extrinsic compression, it will be continuous.
It will be continuous. Okay. So you said intermittent versus continuous dysphagia. Okay. Intermittent by usually indicates probably one of the esophageal motor disorders, motility disorders, whereas continuous, we can take it for granted that it is probably something organic. Now, anything else that you would like to ask?
How it relieves, whether it is relieving.
So what will you ask? In patients, what do they do to relieve? So what is a common history you'll find in patients who have got a esophageal motility disorder? What do they do to relieve themselves of this problem?
They try to drink a lot of water, or they would try to
they usually try to drink a lot of water, but that any person with a dysphagia, food getting stuck will do it. That's a reflex.
Yes.
Many of these patients get relief by actually raising their arms above the head.
Yes.
Keeping it for some time. You understand? So that's a very common thing which these people do to relieve themselves. So you said painless dysphagia, non-progressive, and you have heartburn, regurgitation. Will you also ask about nighttime, nocturnal, nasal regurgitation and choking? What would that take?
Yes, sir. Yes, in case of severe reflux, a patient will have nasal regurgitation and choking. Also. Yes.
What is the difference between reflux and regurgitation? What is reflux and what is regurgitation?
Reflux is the when the content of stomach comes in the esophagus, it is the reflux. But regurgitation is that when effortlessly the content from either esophagus or the stomach content, they come in the mouth. So that is the regurgitation.
Which is active and which is passive? Which of the two is active, involving active diaphragmatic contraction, and which one will be passive?
So, ma'am, reflux is the passive, and regurgitation is the active.
It's Murphy's law, no? Always speak the wrong. It's just the reverse. that is what is Murphy's law. Whatever you say will always, yeah.
It's the other way around.
It's just the other way around.
Okay, reflux is the active.
Obviously, no? Reflux is contracting the stomach and pushing the food into the food pipe. Whereas regurgitation just passive phenomenon. It is just a regurg without involvement of the muscular contraction of the diaphragm or the abdomen.
You must be able to actually give a definition for reflux versus regurgitation versus vomiting. Do you understand the difference?
Yeah, all the three. Yeah.
Do you understand the difference? What is reflux? What is regurgitation? What is vomiting?
Forceful contraction.
Yes, sir.
I think you should be very, very clear about the differences. Okay, fine.
What will be the difference in reflux between achalasia cardia and patients with reflux disease, acid reflux? Difference in the reflux. Can you get a reflux in achalasia cardia?
Yes, ma'am.
Can you get a heartburn?
No, in achalasia we are not getting
30% can get heartburn. So the heartburn does occur because of food stasis and bacterial fermentation and acid production. That's why the case is kept there. You know, he mentioned that. What's the comment on the esomeprazole given 3 times a day? What's the comment on that? There's an esomeprazole 40 milligram 3 times a day.
Yes.
What's your comment on that?
It is a high dose PPI, ma'am.
Is this the way you give? Is this the way? Is this the recommendation? You get 3 times a day?
No, ma'am.
What's the recommendation?
40 milligram OD or twice daily, ma'am.
How do you give it? What do you tell the patient? Just pop in a tablet at 8 o'clock and pop a tablet at 8 o'clock in the evening? What do you tell the patient? How does he take it? I think they're deviating from this. All these are very simple questions, okay? That means it only tells us that they're not seeing cases in the outpatient. So once you see cases in the outpatient, you have to give a prescription. How would you give a prescription for a reflux disease? These are the questions that we asked in the exam. Simple questions. Yeah. Continue, Dr. GN.
Yeah. So I think you should read up more about proper prescriptions of PPI and the management of reflux disease. Okay. So now you've seen this. Anyway, this patient had this particular investigation. What is this investigation and what is your interpretation? Have you seen this investigation being done?
Yes, sir.
What is this investigation? How do you do it?
This is the high resolution manometry report, and it is showing, sir.
Esophageal manometry. Don't just say high resolution manometry. Esophageal manometry.
Yeah, high resolution esophageal manometry, and the upper line showing the
what is this? What does this indicate?
Upper esophageal sphincters.
What does this indicate?
Lower esophageal sphincter.
Okay. So what does it show to you?
So in this, it is like pan-esophageal pressurization.
Where is the swallow reflex? Where is the swallow reflex? Where do you think the swallow this thing has been given? Can you show that in the UAS? Where is it?
He has access to pointer.
No. GN, you have to show.
There, it's written there, swallow, no? The patient is given a swallow, there's mentioned the ninth
Can you
swallow.
see that?
And there it's mentioned that up the one is going up.
Hello?
What would you expect normally?
Yeah.
What would you expect when there's a swallow? What do you expect to see in the lower sphincter?
There should be a relaxation of lower sphincter, ma'am. And that is not present here. The IRP seems to be high because it is always a green color. There is no relaxation after swallowing.
Okay. So this is the swallow where it starts. Normally you would expect this thing to become blue.
Lower pressure zone.
Okay. Okay.
Yes.
What is lying here? What is this? What does this indicate? This part?
This is the cardia of the stomach.
Very good. Very good. So now what is your interpretation and what is your diagnosis?
There is failure of relaxation of the lower sphincter as evidenced by the continuous increased pressure in the LES. And therefore it is showing achalasia cardia, and there is we can see the green lines in the whole esophagus, and that is suggestive of pan-esophageal pressurization. It is, you can see in the more than 20% of the swallows.
More than 20%.
Therefore,
okay. So
it is suggestive of achalasia cardia type 2, sir.
It is suggestive of how do you classify achalasia cardia?
It is 3 types of type 1, 2, 3. Type 1 achalasia cardia, it is the classic achalasia where there will be no peristalsis. Type 2 is the pan-esophageal pressurization, where we will be a continuous high pressure zone in the esophagus in more than 20% of the swallows. And type 3 is the spastic achalasia, where in the lower part of the esophagus there will be high pressure zone where we can see spastic segment in the lower esophagus.
And what is pseudoachalasia?
Pseudoachalasia, when there is the mechanical obstruction and their peristalsis will be present and IRP will be high. It is called pseudoachalasia.
Secondary achalasia?
Pardon, ma'am?
What is secondary achalasia? How do you differentiate pseudoachalasia from secondary achalasia? So secondary achalasia is the compression, when you have fundic growth, when you have nodes, those are all secondary. Pseudoachalasia is a paraneoplastic manifestation in celiac disease, melanomas, they're all pseudo. That is, they have a manifestation like achalasia, but the cause is not secondary, nor is it primary.
So your diagnosis in this patient is type 2 achalasia, isn't it?
Yes.
Okay. Any other investigation? Will you do any other investigation? Or are you happy with it?
Sir, I want to do one OGD scopy to look for any pseudoachalasia or secondary achalasia before proceeding towards the management.
OGD will tell you about secondary achalasia.
Prashant, please mute. Prashant, please mute.
Any obstruction, is there any mechanical obstruction or?
Yeah. So what madam said, it is secondary achalasia. So
Yes.
basically you need to rule out this secondary achalasia by doing an upper GI endoscopy, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So
also looking for a hiatus hernia is most important. No? Normally to get picked up in HREA, but in case you miss, you have to look very closely because when you're planning for certain procedures, some hiatus hernia comes in the way.
Yes, ma'am.
quickly tell us what are the management options?
So management can be a medical or endoscopic or surgical. The medical management consists of calcium channel blockers or nitrates, but there is no
One
proven
is
role.
pharmacotherapy. Okay, next.
Second is the pneumatic dilatation. Sorry, second is the botulinum toxin injection.
Injection therapy.
Pharmacotherapy.
Okay.
Then pneumatic dilatation, where we can do a CRE balloon dilatation.
Balloon, no?
Yes, ma'am.
Is it CRE balloon dilatation or
it's CRE? You said CRE. What are the types of dilators in the esophagus?
Savary-Giller dilator and CRE balloon dilator.
Any other dilator?
And what, ma'am?
Any other dilator? When
Ma'am,
do
it
you
can
use
be
a
Bugge
CRE?
dilator.
When do you use a CRE dilator? What are the indications for CRE balloon dilatation?
In case of malignant.
I think just ask them to read all this.
Yeah, I think you should read CRE, Rigiflex dilators for pneumatic dilatation. They're all, I mean, you must read what are the types of dilators and what are the various indications for use of the various types of dilators. Okay, you'll be asked in the instrument section. You may be given one dilator and then you'll be asked, or even if you have a small short presentation like this, you'll be asked. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Can we call in Nija if she is ready?
Rajesh, any questions from your side, Rajesh? As far
as
yeah,
I think it is fine. Yeah.
Fine.
Actually, it's not the balloon is not CRE balloon. It's achalasia balloon or pneumatic balloon, commonly Rigiflex and.
What is the full form of CRE?
Controlled radial expansion.
Controlled radial expansion. So, what is the biggest problem with the pneumatic dilators that are used for achalasia?
In pneumatic dilatations, there will be only tangential, both tangential and radial force. Because of that, there will be more friction in pneumatic dilatation compared to CI dilatation, where there will be only radial force.
Is the pneumatic dilatation which you do for achalasia controlled or uncontrolled?
That is uncontrolled.
You don't have any control. That is the biggest problem, isn't it? Even though you have 3 sizes, but you don't have a control.
Yes, sir.
No? So CRE is controlled radial expansion, which is usually through the scope, and then you do it under vision, direct vision.
And in the same sitting, you can increase from 30 to 35 to 40, but that is not possible with you should never use the same, and the same sitting, you never use all the 3 dilators, okay? For the achalasia, you have to take a different session for the next, and the third, only on the third, the same will take. You understand? Remember that you must have, you must know the differences between CRE and Rigiflex dilator.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. These are the 3 types you mentioned, and it's Snija. Can you come in?
Yes.
The last. Okay.
Okay, thank you,
Sir.
Aniket. Snija, are you
Yes,
ready?
sir. I'm ready, sir.
Okay.
A 68-year male presents with a 6-week history of watery diarrhea. He has mild abdominal cramps and urgency that are partially relieved after bowel movements, but denies GI bleeding, weight loss, fever, or fecal incontinence.
So what more do you want out of the history? This is the history that has been given. Six-week history in a 68-year-old man.
6 weeks. Any history of fever?
Mm-hmm.
Um,
There is no history of fever.
any history of similar complaint in the past?
This is the first time he is having. So you said
Is there
history
any,
of this is similar history in the past. Why did you ask? And what is there in your mind when you ask for a similar problem in the past?
like a chronic condition, or is it an acute condition? Is
Now,
it a precipitation?
you have a patient who presents with a 6-week history of watery diarrhea. Isn't it chronic?
Yes, sir.
Then why do you bring in acute?
No, sir. Acute condition or a chronic condition?
What is this acute condition and chronic condition that you're talking of?
Acute condition could be a infection or a malignancy. Chronic condition could be an inflammatory bowel disease, or it could be an IBS.
Now, acute condition, you mentioned about malignancy and an infection.
Infection.
Okay. Which infections would go on for 6 weeks?
Ankit, take over.
It's a parasitic infection. Parasitic infection can last for 6 weeks.
What parasitic infection?
And amoebiosis.
Amoebiasis
and
is going on for 6 weeks.
Yersinia and Aeromonas.
Amoebiasis is going on for 6 weeks. Aniket?
Yes, sir.
So you are also suffering from network bandwidth
Then
problem.
Guruvilla is there. Guruvilla.
Guruvilla?
Hello, hello,
Yeah,
sir.
yeah.
Yes, sir.
So how would you analyze this? What more information do you want out of this patient?
Sir, I would like to know about the first. I would like to differentiate whether it is a small bowel diarrhea or large bowel diarrhea by asking any GA bleed or tenesmus. Then differentiate whether it is a small bowel diarrhea. And following that, since after then I want to differentiate whether it is any osmotic or a secretory diarrhea or a fatty diarrhea. So and associated any complications of any malabsorption, associated features of any malabsorption of vitamin deficiencies, since the patient is having a chronic diarrhea from the history. And predisposing factors of any inflammation also I would be looking for. And inflammatory causes like infectious inflammatory bowel disease. And since it's an old age patient, ischemia also I would like to keep it as a possibility.
Now you have
and
a
also
68-year-old man, 6-week history,
okay, sir.
Diarrhea, but there are abdominal cramps, sir. There is urgency.
Okay, sir.
So what does it convey?
It suggests that urgency is suggestive of rectal involvement, sir.
The frequency is very high. It passes about 12 to 14 times per day. And anything else that you would ask for? Nocturnal frequency?
The nocturnal frequency to differentiate between any functional or organic disease, sir. Or nocturnal frequency more in favor of organic diseases.
And then if we are thinking of a large bowel diarrhea, what
sir.
would be on the history? What are the things that you would ask for? We've asked for GI bleeding. We asked for weight loss, fever, fecal incontinence. Anything else?
Incomplete evaluation, tenesmus.
Okay, urgency is there. He's got abdominal cramps, so I think basically it indirectly points out towards the presence of a tenesmus. But anything else?
Sir, then no, sir. No.
Dr. Rajesh, anything else that you would expect out of a candidate asking or describing a large bowel diarrhea?
Important negative factors of the small bowel, whether it is a foul smelling or a non-foul smelling, also I would like to add, sir.
Yes, and you also asked for extraintestinal manifestations.
Extraintestinal manifestations of IBD.
Never forget that.
Okay,
not only IBD, any of the infections and all can cause can have extraintestinal manifestations, isn't it?
Okay, sir.
Okay. Okay. So what are the causes of a chronic watery diarrhea?
So I would like to classify in terms of, sir, osmotic diarrhea and secretory diarrhea. And in the osmotic diarrhea, basically malabsorption defect, especially carbohydrate malabsorptions. And secretory diarrhea, I would like to think of, again, I would like to classify in terms of initially, I would like to think of any motility disorders.
So it is osmotic versus secretory versus motility versus inflammatory.
And inflammatory, sir. And also malignancy also I'd like to keep in mind, especially colonic carcinoma and lymphomas, since it's a 6-week history and old age people.
What are the example told for secretory?
Sir. Secretory, sir.
Secretory, it was not clear to me.
Secretory, sir, it can be diabetic autonomic neuropathies in this age group.
Secretory diarrhea?
Sir, diabetic autonomic neuropathies in this age group. Then hyperthyroidism, secretory diarrhea. Endocrine causes like hyperthyroidism.
All these conditions you have enumerated as a cause for secretory diarrhea.
Secretory diarrhea, sir.
Are actually causes for diarrhea, which is because of motility. Why does hyperthyroidism cause diarrhea?
Sir, increased motility.
Increased secretion.
Increased secretion.
Increased secretion. What are the causes of a secretory diarrhea? Professor Verghese Thomas wants to know.
Sir, I'd like to classify in terms of disorders of motility and endocrine causes, and as well as
Just list out, doctor, what are the causes of secretory diarrhea? Name some common cause of secretory diarrhea.
Bacterial toxins, madam. Initially, I would like to.
What's the most common cause of secretory diarrhea? Infection.
Infection, madam.
What
infection?
Bacterial infections.
What bacteria? You have to go and have a dinner now, no?
Bacteria by enterotox, Shigella, Salmonella, E. coli.
Causing watery diarrhea.
No, Shigella, colon, no.
Okay, agreed. Toxigenic, those producing toxins. Agreed.
Okay, sir. Then it can cause. Okay, sir. Classified as secretory diarrhea is classified as it can be due to rapid intestinal transit, or it can be due to iron transport defect. It can be due to intestinal ischemia, sir, along with the toxins. And the iron transport defect.
Urula, you're very confused. You're very, very confused. I think you've mixed up everything together. You've mixed up motility with secretory. You're occasionally talking about
and ischemia.
Ischemia. I don't know how you're able to connect all these things. The question was very, very specific. What is the commonest cause of secretory diarrhea in our country?
Okay, sir.
What is the mechanism in secretory diarrhea? I think if you go that way, it may be easier to.
Sir, there are basically.
What is the basic mechanism? Don't go for. Sometimes there are multiple causes for diarrhea, but what is the basic mechanism?
Secretagogues. endogenous toxins. In India, it is cholera. Enterotoxin secreted by cholera is a water
Either
cause of
excessive
watery diarrhea
secretion
in
or
infants.
decreased absorption of the fluid.
Okay, sir.
Okay, toxins you already mentioned. You said secretagogues. What are those?
Secretagogues can be endogenous or exogenous, sir. In endogenous secretagogues, neuroendocrine tumors will come, sir. Example like carcinoid tumors.
Okay. Next.
Then, sir, whenever there is a mucosal disease is involved diffusely, that can lead to loss of intestinal surface area like celiac disease and lymphomas. Any mucosal infiltrating IPSIDs can present with secretory diarrhea, sir. Then rapid intestinal transit.
No, that is no. You are mixing up. Secretory diarrhea is the net secretion of fluid into the lumen of the intestine, which cause fluidity and then produce diarrhea. Okay.
Okay, sir.
You tell us what is the stool examination show in patients with inflammatory diarrhea, in patients with motility diarrhea, in patients with secretory diarrhea, and osmotic.
Okay, sir. In inflammatory diarrhea, I would like stool examination will be showing pustules and pustules, sir. In
pustules and RBCs and all.
Pustules and RBC.
Suggest that there is an inflammatory diarrhea.
Inflammatory diarrhea.
Okay. How would you diagnose
fecal calprotectin?
Fecal calprotectin. Okay. You've picked up the simplest one first. Very good. What about motility diarrhea?
Sir, motility type.
What will the stool examination show?
It will be normal.
Normal. Okay. What will the stool examination in osmotic diarrhea?
Sir, osmotic type, we have to look at stool pH and stool reducing substances. Stool pH less than 5.5 suggestive of carbohydrate malabsorption, and reducing substances such as sugar also give a fair idea of reducing substance will be positive in carbohydrate malabsorption. Then osmotic gap can be looked, sir.
How do you look at osmotic gap?
2 into 5. That is two different. I'm not remembering.
So you said osmotic. So something regarding osmotic is.
Sir, you have to add sodium and potassium and multiply into 2. Divide minus.
You check the stool osmolality.
Okay, sir. Stool osmolality.
And whether the sodium and potassium added together will account for it, or if there is any deficit.
Deficit, sir.
Okay, I think you have to read.
You have to read all this. Okay. So basically, by way of investigations, the most important thing in this patient would be, of course, stool examination. Anything else that you will do? This patient has got diarrhea, 6 weeks, 68-year-old man with abdominal cramps, urgency. We've done a stool examination, which does not show anything much. What will you do next?
Sir, I would like plan in favor of diagnosing and for generalized.
What happened?
Sir, hello.
Come again.
Sir, diagnosis I would like to plan in terms of initially to plan for investigation. Initial basic investigation I would like to plan in favor of the diagnosis. I would like to look for any complete blood count. I'd like to look for total count for raised possibility of infections along with CRP and ESR, and neutrophilic manifestations also. I'd be neutrophilic increase also I'd be looking for. Then CRP and ESR is also look for any features of any infections.
Okay, then, they are not normal.
Then, sir, since it's a 68-year-old with 6 weeks history of diarrhea, by markers, I would look for any immunosuppressed stage in this patient. So HIV also should be looking in this patient. Okay. And then, sir, specific investigation, I would like to look at do a OGD-scopy and take a D2 biopsy to look for the mucosal lesions.
Abdominal cramps urgency, you're going to do an upper GI endoscopy.
Watery diarrhea.
Okay, you want to take a biopsy from second part of the group.
D2 for watery diarrhea.
Okay. Anything else that you would like to, that is normal?
Okay, sir. Then I would like to do a complete ileocolonoscopy for evaluation of the large bowel and the terminal ileum to look for the any features of inflammatory bowel disease. And I will also keep in mind, since it's a 68-year-old, I will also keep in mind features of microscopic colitis as a possibility, and take biopsy and look for any features of microscopic colitis as well.
Okay. We've taken biopsies. Can you just tell us what is this?
Stool studies show. Sir, this is lipid infiltration of the foamy lipid infiltration of the crypt.
Just tell me what it shows.
Only infiltration of the crypt. That means you've not seen a histology, is it? What are these cells?
No.
Star-shaped cells? What are they? What are these cells? First and foremost, is it a colonic biopsy or is it a duodenal biopsy? You clench your teeth like that in examination.
Madam, colonic biopsy.
So what are these cells? Okay, I think this. Finish.
Yeah, we'll have to finish this. Basically,
very
I wanted to ask you what your diagnosis is. Basically, there's a lot of infiltration with lymphocytes here, and that is why I wanted to ask you the diagnosis. Basically, the diagnosis was lymphocytic colitis, and you know what? This one is a classical thing of collagenous. You find a collagen layer here. This is called collagenous colitis. Okay. Okay, right. I think we are. Dr. Rajesh,
we don't have time now. It's already 9:45.
Yeah, it's already 9:45. I think we finished 4 cases.
That's good enough. I think any final comments by the faculty?
Rajesh, your side. I've given one.
I think it is okay. I mean, there's in the learning process, but I think it was generally okay. I think the second case was a bit difficult as compared to the other 3.
A lot of hesitancy, I think, amongst the PGs as far as DNB exam is concerned. No one will pardon for the way you're describing until you the exam. If you're down south, they'll be lenient, but if you go up north, they will. I mean, I'll be very frank with you. For the students who appeared, if you're hesitant in your answer, if you're very fluent with your answers, and you just keep talking and your competency in speaking, we'll walk through. But if you start saying something, there are foamy cells and there's something like this and things like that, they'll capture you then and there and see and ensure that you do not know anything, so that you have nothing to grudge why you failed. I'll be very frank about it. On the other hand, if you're very confident and you just keep talking and you just keep speaking, and you have very good clarity in your mind, you're able to classify what it is. Doctor, these are the causes. This is what it is. This is what it is. And you keep discussing the case. It will be a cakewalk. It's just a cakewalk. But I find that students who hesitate, examiners are just waiting to capture you. They're just waiting to capture that particular point where they pull you down to ensure that you do not know anything. Okay? They will keep on dragging you, like vomiting, regurgitation. They'll say, oh, he does not even know the basics. I'll be very frank about it because I'm quite tough that way. Because ultimately, the exam you should do well. I think the message is very clear. Down south, yes, we examiners are lenient. Up north, it's not the way it is. It's not the way at all. It's only 1/3 pass, 20% pass. And they're just waiting to say, and this is, they say, you do not know even this. That's the way they do. So I want all the PGs who presented today You have to buck up. You have to hear. See, the whole problem is this. They are giving you the history. But I'll tell you in exam, you will not even be able to take all the history that GN mentioned today. So many things he addressed today. These are the points, nice points that he mentioned about the star and so many things he taught you. All of you, I think the whole problem now is there's no history taking. That's the whole problem. So the whole concept of examination has changed. So whatever be it, I think simple things like how to give esomeprazole, absolutely, they'll come down to dyspepsia. I remember Sarin coming once to the OP, he just picked up 4 cases from the OP and he said, now discuss dyspepsia, discuss flatulence. That's all. That's all. Exam over. Finished. But that's the way they want it. They want you to be someone really good, someone who's really efficient. You cannot talk of esomeprazole 3 times a day. How would you give a esomeprazole? What is CRE balloon? Simple. Actually, today, we never went into any high level. It was just probably slightly more than MD minus the DM level. I'm sure you'll all agree with me. I'm a little tough that way, but ultimately they do very well in the exam. Once you're tough, they do well. If you're a bit lenient and say that you've done well, they'll think, they're on top of the world. So that's
I think, very pertinent. I think you should know the definitions very clearly and the criteria for diagnostic criteria. And also, if you ask examples, you should give the most common examples for each thing instead of giving some vague examples. So then it's very clear that you know what type of diarrhea you're talking about, all these things. So you should really go back and read up all those things which you discussed and get things more organized in your mind. I think they knew most of the things, but they were not well organized.
Well, that can happen, sir. Sir, that can happen with the DM exam. And you're the father, you're the father-in-law, you're the mother and mother-in-law. This does not happen. So now what's happening is candidates are choosing centers down south. And the failure rate was very high in Delhi last time, whereas almost 100% results from down south. So these things are happening. So, like in DM exam, there's no problem. They just say today's performance was like this, but this does not happen in DND exam. This does not, VT and I have been examiners and we cannot raise our voice at all. We just keep quiet because we cannot even help the candidate. It's a fact. So I think all of you have to read. You have to read the basic. Please go back to Schlesinger, read all the chapters. Dr. G has taken so much trouble in telling you what are the things that you should read. So those are the things that you have to read. And examiners can go right down to the basics of basics, or they can go, you answer well, they'll go to your theory. But if you don't answer well, they'll drop you down to anatomy and physiology and then say, this is all that you know. I'm very frank about it. GN, VT, you can comment.
Yeah. I thought a good exercise for all these is just go to the OPD, pick up a case, take a history, and discuss it with your consultant, your consultant or even your superior.
The best place is actually the endoscopy room, because at least endoscopies are going on now still. So at least those cases they can pick up, nowadays we don't even get cases OP, but at least there are 4 or 5 cases coming to the endoscopy suite. So there they can pick up those 4 or 5 cases and take it as case presentation.
Just go through the history,
history, exactly.
Analyze it. Keep analyzing the history. I think 80% of your job is done. The remaining 20%, of course, follows a good history taking and analysis. I think that is what is most important. Varghese?
Yeah, what I feel is that they have to present more, which I think they have to ask their consultants to help them out in their presentation. And if the consultants are busy, they themselves can do what is known as micro presentation. One of them take a case and present in front of the other, then they can criticize themselves. So the more you present, the more bold you become, the way in which things will get organized. And organize it. It's not that they don't know, but at that particular point of time, they don't know how to say it in an organized way. That's what. It has to click at that particular point. So you have to keep on presenting cases and get the experience of how to sort out things and tell in the correct order of things. That's what I feel. I think we are already late. It is 9:48. I think should we wind up now?
Yeah,
Yes.
please. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay,
Thank you, Gian. Yeah.
Thank you, Gian. You have taken lots of pains to present these cases, great cases today, and teach them a lot of new points. And you have also done a different style, which is also very attractive.
Yeah, many of the topics Gian are not covered, so very
Yeah,
good.
I think the students, I
Very
have
important.
requested the students, please read around the topic which Gian has given you, and pouches and all. Unless you go read, you will never find. And if you get a case in the examination, it will be difficult to answer. So it's a great case. So once again, thanks Gian for that great teaching, and thanks Rajesh for your suggestions and cooperation in this class. Of course, thanks to ma'am always who is there to support us, and to all the other faculty and also students. As Ravikiran and Snija could not actively participate, I think we should give them chance next time. Please they be there with a wide bandwidth. So, and be closer to your transmitting session if you have Wi-Fi, or directly connect your computer with a LAN. That will be better to get a better bandwidth. With these words, we close. Are you there, Dr. Sojan?
Okay, so formality.
Okay, thank you. So,
Thank
Sojan is
you.
not there, so thanks everybody.
Thank
And
you. Good
for
night.
Thursday will be a break, and then we'll start again next Tuesday. Next Thursday, it's a break, but we'll have instrument session coming on 30th also. So next is clinics by Dr. LVK, and 27th, 30th is instrument class. Okay, thank you. Good night.
Bye. Good night.
Good night. Thanks, Dr. Rajesh and Dr. Gian. Bye.
Thank you, ma'am.